Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro asked CELAC to organize an urgent conference on sovereignty and regional peace following the presence of U.S. military forces in the Caribbean. And in Colombia, President Gustavo Petro declared that his country's military forces will no longer depend on U.S. weapons, consolidating the national sovereignty of the Colombian army. And in Palestine, Israeli airstrikes and ground raids continue to force the displacement of more than 2 million Palestinians. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Luis Alberto Matos from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. The President of Venezuela called on Monday for the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, to convene its member countries for an urgent conference on sovereignty and regional peace, following the presence of U.S. military forces in the Caribbean. Maduro sent a letter to Colombian President Gustavo Petro, who currently holds the pro-tempore presidency of the regional organization, to coordinate this emergency meeting, the President emphasized during a press conference. Maduro wants CELAC to facilitate dialogue to avoid conflict in the Caribbean. The proposal awaits the support of regional leaders to coordinate efforts to strengthen the sovereignty of Latin American and Caribbean countries in the face of external interventions. And the Bolivian government expressed solidarity with Venezuela in response to threats from the United States. The action came during the commemorative ceremonies marking 142 years of diplomatic relations between Bolivia and Venezuela. Bolivian Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs Elmer Catarina highlighted the Bolivarian government's ongoing support for Bolivia in areas such as defending democracy, as well as academic and professional training. He also acknowledged Caracas' solidarity during the forest fires and the humanitarian aid provided during the measles health emergency. For his part, the Venezuelan ambassador to Bolivia, Cesar Trompis, emphasized the strategic importance of bilateral relations. In other news, the Standing Committee for the Defense of Human Rights in Ecuador reported that 394 people deprived of their freedom died in Guayaquil in 2025, mostly due to health issues and human rights violations. In calling for a declaration of emergency in the prison system, with priority given to the Guayas No. 1, Esmeraldas, and Cotopaxi detention centers, the committee insisted on the immediate restoration of adequate food and health services, as well as visits and rehabilitation programs, with effective judicial control and independent auditing. Given this situation, the committee will continue to take criminal and constitutional legal action to ensure the justiciability of the rights of all persons. And this September 16th marks the anniversary of Mexico's independence, so it is traditional for the streets to be filled with all kinds of patriotic items, an activity that creates jobs and boosts the economy. Daniel Rosa with the details.
It's the skillful hands of Osbelia contributing to the colorfulness of the Mexican national holidays.
Everything I learned, all the knowledge I have is here. Everything since I was 15 or 16 years old. That was when I stayed here with them.
Banderas Juanito is the name of this workshop, which also provides employment for several families.
Yes, I am the mother of 2 girls, and they are delighted with this time of the year, to be honest. Every year they ask me for their flag.
It is not only flag, but also various other items that are manufactured throughout the year, keeping this family business alive, despite the increasing arrival of industrialized products from other countries.
Yes, because it may be cheaper, but in terms of quality, we Mexicans have the best quality.
And that quality enhances the national holidays.
I am proud to be Mexican and to come here to buy anything, like flags, earrings, or other items.
Regularmente se realizan kermeses, bailables,
Regularly held events include fairs, dances, family gatherings, and, of course, celebrations to honor our Independence Day.
En estas fechas, sus calles lucen semivacías porque los hombres
Estimates by the chambers of commerce services, and tourism indicate that the economic impact of the national holidays in Mexico will be around $2 million.
En la Cámara, Víctor Hugo Figueroa, Daniel Rosas, Telesur, Oxolotepec, Estado de México.
And citizens of Mexico commemorate Independence Day in a ceremony led by President Claudia Sheinbaum from the National Palace balcony. The capital's Zócalo is decorated for the celebration of the Cry of Independence, uniting millions of Mexicans. This celebration preserves the memory of the day the libertarian movement began and honors its founders. Independence Day is a remembrance of Mexico's freedom heroes and a reaffirmation of the country's commitment to justice, sovereignty, and solidarity. Independence Day in Mexico is celebrated on September 16th, but the ceremony of the Cry of Independence is held on the night of September 15th to honor Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla, who called on the population to take action. We now have our first break coming up. Remember, you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We're going to be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Colombian President Gustavo Petro declared that his country's military forces will no longer depend on U.S. weapons, consolidating the national sovereignty of the Colombian army. During a Council of Ministers meeting in the city of Bogota, President Petro questioned the U.S. government's announcement that Colombia had been certified as a key ally in the fight against drug trafficking, highlighting his administration's work against drug cultivation. He cited the high drug consumption rate in the U.S. and authorities' inability to resolve the problem. The Colombian president denounced the United States' attacks on Venezuela fishing boats, calling them disproportionate killings that undermine the region's integrity and sovereignty.
Se acaba la dependencia del ejército de Colombia.
The Colombian army and its military forces are no longer dependent on U.S. weapons. No more handouts or gifts. They have been decertified, that is the decision. The Colombian army is better off buying its own weapons or making them with its own resources, because otherwise it will not be an army of national sovereignty. That is a consequence. The police stopped buying clock guns, which were used to kill the senator. They were sold in a state in the United States, transferred to Florida, and from there they arrived in Colombia, who knows how, and were used to kill.
In Argentina, President Javier Milei presented the 2026 budget plan in a speech that insists on his agenda of neoliberal adjustments that deepen cuts and the dismantling of the state. In a national broadcast message, the president presented the broad outlines of the 2026 national budget, emphasizing the neoliberal policy of zero fiscal deficit. In his intervention, President Milei criticized the previous administrations while celebrating the so-called success of his government despite the increase of the inflation and a growing number of people living in poverty and homelessness, and the adjustment policies in health and education that resulted in the loss of votes in the province of Buenos Aires in last elections. And at the same time as President Javier Milei's announcement, citizens organized a series of pot-bagging protests in different neighborhoods of the Argentine capital. During the national broadcast, residents of autonomous city of Buenos Aires rejected fiscal adjustments, cuts in health and education, as well as vetoes of laws approved by Congress. Argentina's President Javier Milei traveled to Paraguay to participate in a new conservative political action conference and meet with his counterpart from that country, Santiago Peña. The conference will also be attended by Santiago Peña administration officials, including his ministers of Industry and Trade, Javier Jimenez, and Foreign Affairs, Ruben Ramirez. According to the organization's schedule, Milei will be one of the key speakers of the day, along with the President of Paraguay, with whom he will hold then bilateral meeting. CEPAC is the oldest conservative forum in the United States, organized annually by the American Conservative Union and bringing together politicians, activists, and opinion leaders from the conservative sphere. Also in Argentina, the National Electoral Chamber overturned a first-instance ruling that allowed former President Cristina Fernández Kirchner to vote in the 2025 national legislative elections. Following the ruling by the National Electoral Chamber, the former president is excluded from the electoral register and unable to participate in the election scheduled for Sunday, October 26. The Electoral Court indicated that the decision is an administrative action that complies with established legal procedures. It should be noted that the former president never requested to remain on the register, so her exclusion is in compliance with the established legal steps. However, this does not change the campaign or the political strategy of Kirchnerism. Moving on to other news, in Malawi, polls open Tuesday for the country's general elections, which will elect the next president, 229 parliament seats, and over 500 local government councillors. Citizens will choose between 17 presidential candidates, although the two frontrunners are the same from the last presidential elections: current President Lazarus Chakwera from the Malawi Congress Party and Peter Mutharika from the main opposition Democratic Progressive Party. This process comes after the annulment of the 2019 elections amid irregularities and corruption scandals, resulting in a rerun of the elections on 2020 and the appointment of Chakwera as president. If no presidential candidate secures 50 plus 1% of the votes, a runoff election is held in under 30 days. And the joint military exercises Zapad 2025 between Russia and Belarus are taking place on shared territory, as well as between the Baltic Sea and the Barents Sea. The exercises, called West 2025, will end on Tuesday and are intended to demonstrate the defensive relationship between Minsk and Moscow, as well as Russia's military power. The maneuvers consisted of planning the deployment of tactical nuclear weapons, in addition to the Oreshnik missile system. Some NATO countries, including Poland, raised their alert level, while Belarus and Russia affirmed that the planned exercises are not directed against any particular country. And in Greenland, member countries of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization participated in the joint military exercises Arctic 2025. The actions took place without the presence of U.S. troops, despite President Donald Trump's intentions to control the territory. In this context, Germany, France, Sweden, and Norway participated in military exercises aimed at strengthening NATO's joint capabilities in the event of potential emergencies in the Arctic. The Danish Ministry of Defense confirmed that these exercises are part of an annual plan that will focus on strategic areas of the Arctic, which are of growing geopolitical importance. We now have our second break coming up. Before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English, there you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. If you found your break, don't go away. Welcome back. In Palestine, Israeli airstrikes and ground raids continue to force the displacement of more than 2 million Palestinians after 710 days of genocidal war. The Gaza Ministry of Health reported that Israeli attacks killed around 62 people in the last 24 hours, increasing the number of fatalities since 2023 to over 64,905, with an additional 164,926 people wounded and over 9,000 missing. Health authorities added that the injured were transferred to various hospitals as the attacks took place in different residential areas. In this scenario, they warned that a large number of victims remain under the rubble due to the blockade of emergency and rescue teams by Israeli forces. And on Monday, the Israeli army launched its ground offensive to take the city of Gaza, located in the north of the Strip, with its tanks advancing slowly after a series of intense airstrikes. Some 300,000 people were forced to flee the city due to the intensification of Israeli attacks in the city of Gaza, which in mid-August was home to about 1 million Palestinians. According to Netanyahu's government, these new bombings are aimed at eradicating the Palestinian Islamic resistance movement, Hamas. As a result of these new attacks, Palestinian health authorities report that 62 people were killed in the Gaza Strip. The total death toll since the start of the Israeli aggression in October 2023 stands at 64,905. Meanwhile, more than 3,000 people have been displaced to Al-Mawasi, an area described as a concentration zone. Al-Mawasi lacks basic services including water, healthcare, and food. Diseases are spreading due to overcrowding. People are forced to flee their homes due to aggression by occupation forces who bomb residential buildings and centers for displaced persons in clear violation of international law and human rights. Members of the Global Sumut Flotilla GSF announced that 18 ships under strict security protocols began their journey from Italy to Gaza as part of an international humanitarian mission seeking to break the Israeli blockade. According to an official statement, dozens of additional boats will depart from Tunisia and Greece on September 16th with the aim of converging in international waters to continue towards the Gaza Strip. GSF explained that the preparations face significant setbacks. Israeli drone attacks against two ships, Family and Alma, docked in Tunisia, caused delays. To cope with hostilities, organizers reduced passenger capacity on several ships. This ensures activist safety and maintains the humanitarian mission. And in Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez urged the international community to prevent Israel from participating in international sports competitions while the genocide in Gaza continues. The Spanish Prime Minister questions international permissiveness towards Israel during an interparliamentary meeting in the Congress of Deputies, comparing it to the sanctions imposed on Russia after it launched its special military operation in Ukraine. Sánchez highlighted the association agreement suspension with Israel, a measure backed by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. These statements come after the incidents in the last stage of the Tour of Spain cycling race in Madrid, where pro-Palestinian protests forced the cancellation. And U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio landed Tuesday morning in Doha, Qatar, ahead of his meeting with the country's ruling emir, Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani. The goal of the meeting was to mediate after the Israeli bombing against Hamas resistance movement leaders in Doha last week. Rubio called for Qatar to continue its role as a mediator to reach a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. U.S. President Donald Trump assured on Monday that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will not attack Qatar again after Netanyahu did not rule out new attacks during a meeting with Rubio in Jerusalem. Qatar called the Israeli attack coward and treacherous, but said it wouldn't deter it from its role as a mediator alongside Egypt and the United States. And the Iranian government published its comments on the final declaration of the Extraordinary Islamic Arab Summit regarding Israeli aggression against Qatar and Palestine. The Iranian Foreign Ministry reiterated its condemnation of Israeli crimes against the Palestinian people, considering that the establishment of two states does not represent a permanent solution to the problem. It affirms that the only option is to establish a unified democratic state through a referendum that includes all Palestinians inside and outside the occupied territories. Iran recognized the contribution of the governments of Qatar and Egypt in brokering a permanent ceasefire in the region. And on Tuesday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived at court to continue his testimony in the ongoing corruption trial. During the trial, Netanyahu will respond to charges of fraud, breach of trust, and for accepting bribes in 3 different cases. This is the first Israeli leader in office to testify as a defendant in a criminal trial. While this court appearance is taking place, Palestinian residents have reported new attacks against the Gaza Strip, which claimed the lives of at least 12 civilians, although health authorities said the death toll could rise. In Germany, the Home Music Festival brought together artists willing to challenge traditional notions about music. This meeting, which focused on the creation of instruments, included various activities such as workshops, concerts, and exhibitions to encourage musical experimentation and creativity. Yayo Topius, one of the most prominent participants in the event, used books as instruments, adding vibration motors to spark the curiosity of attendees. Topius emphasized that music can come from any object without the need to be a professional. The festival invites us to reflect on the impact of homemade instruments on our musical perception. Like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Join us on our social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Luis Alberto Matos. Thanks for watching.